Try to force me out of my own home? Pay my back rent. I was in a very toxic living situation with a sort of ex-girlfriend, / roommate. We rented a house together, separate bedrooms. We lived our own lives. We'd been there for 3 years. The landlord collected rent from each of us separately instead of one monthly payment. By the end, we were both unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. I was behind 4 months on the rent. She was behind 3 months, and the landlord was getting antsy about it. She was an animal hoarder. During the time I lived with her, she had 3 dogs, half a dozen cats, 20 or so rats, several tanks of fish, a rabbit, and a parrot. All neglected. She'd get a new pet, dote on it for a few months, then get bored. Same as she did with her children who didn't live with her anymore. Same as she did with me. By this time, we fought constantly. I would have loved to move out, but I was trapped by needing to pay off the back rent before I could even start saving for rent and deposit on a new place. One day after a particularly bad argument, she called the cops and told them that she had someone in her house who wouldn't leave. Cops arrived, separated us, and started the interrogation. She says you won't leave. I live here. Oh yeah? How long have you been here? 3 years. Are you on the lease? Yes. The cops looked at each other, then went to explain to her that she couldn't just tell her roommate to leave. They came back with an interim solution. Well, why don't you leave for a few hours until the situation cools down? I'd prefer if she left. So she did. The only thing I was really worried about was that the cops would ask to see the lease. We'd lost our copy a couple of years before, couldn't find it anywhere. 2 days later, she came home and presented me with a new lease that she'd signed with the landlord, dated 3 years previous, that had her listed as the sole occupant. Fine by me. I brought the new lease to a legal aid clinic for an opinion, and they thought it was, from a legal standpoint, hilarious. In particular, the part where the lease was dated a year before the document was created. I also went to social services, who had a copy of the original lease. I explained the situation, and they made a copy to give back to me. And then, the fight just went out of me. I was gathering all this evidence for what exactly? To stay there? An interesting court battle? 2 weeks later, I borrowed a truck and got the hell out. Left in the middle of the day while she was away. Took my clothes and computers and left everything else behind. Couch surfed for the next 6 months while I got my shit together. Never saw or spoke to her again. She got to keep the forged document making her responsible for my share of the rent. Fuck her and fuck the landlord. But that's just ordinary revenge. The petty revenge came in 2 parts. First, at the time, I had a serious coke habit, at least 2 liters a day. The plastic bottles had a 5-cent refundable deposit, but it wasn't worth the trouble to bring them back to the store at that price. So I started saving them. I didn't have any definite plans, maybe build a boat or something. I kept them in a weird little storage room in the basement, 8 by 8 feet, with an outward-facing door. After 3 years, that room was getting seriously full. I'd crack the door a bit, fling an empty bottle on top of the pile, and slam the door shut before the whole mess spilled out. Those bottles were among the items that I left behind when I moved out. I like to imagine the landlord's face when he finally opened that door and that mountain of useless plastic cascaded down on him. The second bit of petty revenge had to do with the parrot. He was neglected just like all the other pets, spending his days in a little cage with stalagmites under the perch. She was planning to teach him to speak, but of course never got around to it. He did like to imitate sounds, though. He was particularly fond of the Martians from Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds album. I took it upon myself to teach him to talk. During my last few weeks there, I'd speak to him anytime she was out of the room, and by the time I moved out, he could say exactly one thing. Hello, Sfredette.